I'm going to finish this conversation regarding former White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. She's getting absolutely blasted, so I've got about a minute and a half of this audio left to play where people are asking her, how is it possible that you didn't notice Joe Biden's cognitive decline? So we're going to go there. Then J.D. Vance is either in Israel or on his way to Israel, and he has a few things to say about what is going on in the Middle East, as does Donald Trump, as Hamas continues their murderous ways. What is next for the terrorist group? Matthew Hurtt is going to... Matthew Hurtt.
That was a good one, Dan.
That was good, wasn't it?
You just mashed them all together.
I did. So Matthew Hurtt, right? Matthew Hurtt is going to join us at, you know what? I've been listening to Karine Jean-Pierre talk about like Biden's disintegrating brain.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I've got disintegrating brain
mission creep.
Disease. It's exactly what it is. All right. So Matthew Hurtt is going to join us at 7:35 on Super Talk. Matt Van Epps. Do you know why that happened, Joan? I just got a thing from a place that a press release talking about how Matt Van Epps is supportive of term limits in Congress.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I'll try to get him on. But
we need more of them.
Well, look at
like
Chuck
a lot
Schumer.
More. I know.
You got Chuck Schumer. You got Nancy. But did you see Nancy Pelosi? I shouldn't do this. Did you see Nancy Pelosi trying to tear up the crown?
Yeah.
And she couldn't do it. And so I think what happened is somebody helped her tear up the crown, and they had a cut, a super cut, as they say. So she's trying to tear up the crown.
The Burger King crown.
Yeah, the Burger King crown. And then she was having trouble, and then they cut the video, and then suddenly she's got it, torn apart.
Yeah.
The woman can't walk or tear up a Burger King crown.
You know what she was doing? She was reprising her role of tearing up, like she tore up the speech.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah. She thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Anyway.
I was rolling on the ground.
So Nancy Pelosi is, you know what, if there were, there's so many. Chuck Grassley on our side, on the Republican side. You got Chuck Grassley, who is, how old is Chuck Grassley?
Old.
Sam, how old is Chuck Grassley? Look that up for me, would you? That's why Sam hates working with me. But, Grassley, he sounds like he's 105.
He's 92.
92, man. Come on. So, but you know what the other side of that argument is, and I've said this forever, is that we have, term limits every 2 years. The people in the district can vote for, or in the Senate 6. But, you have people in every couple of years for the House. People can vote on whether or not they want their congressperson in that role. And so I'm not necessarily, I'm a little mushy, to be honest, on term limits. I look at somebody like, Chuck Grassley, who is clearly older, and he's got a sort of a halting way about him. But for the love of all that is holy, when you get to the point where if you're Mitch McConnell, I'll pick on my side, right? If you're Mitch McConnell and you keep freezing up and now you're falling in the hallways of Congress, dude, go home. Just go home. You shouldn't be here anymore. Respectfully, you shouldn't. On the other side, Dianne Feinstein, how long was she, practically comatose before the people finally admitted that she had Alzheimer's, right? So I think that there might be somewhere in the middle where, okay, we don't necessarily need term limits because you know what? There's some really good Congress people out there who, I may not want to see them leave. Just because they've been in Congress for I don't know how long, whatever. So term limits. I'm all over the road on term limits. Are you pro or for? Are you pro or against term limits, Joan? I think you're probably for.
I'm for them.
Of course you are.
It works in the case of governors.
Yeah,
it works very well. You set your. I'm not in agreement, by the way, with just one term, which they do in Virginia, one term only.
For governors?
I'm pretty sure it's only one term.
Okay, fair.
But I do think that it helps move the narrative along, and it helps to stop this politically entrenched ideology from taking hold.
Do you know what else it does, Joan? And this is point for Joan, is that these guys are always worried about being reelected. You put the term limits in there, and they're not worried about being reelected. There's a story in The Hill, actually, where and I'm going to gloss over it now, but there's a story in The Hill where the Democrats are really worried because they're watching and they're looking and they're seeing the polling that shows that people are blaming them for the shutdown. And so they're sort of rocking a hard place because they're afraid to anger the base, all the No Kings people out there that were doing the protesting. So they're afraid to anger the base, the Democrats. They're afraid to anger the base because then they're worried that they're going to be primaried. So they're basically effectively keeping the government shut down because they're afraid of what their base of voters will do to them. So if you take out, if you put in term limits and take out the whole I've got to go and be reelected and all that kind of stuff, well, then maybe that makes the government function better. Hey, Sam, let's do this. Hey, can we do a Daily Dan poll? Let's do a Daily Dan poll. Are you for, I want to phrase it the right way. Do you believe that the government would function better with term limits? Let's do that. Because I know that if I say, are you for or against term limits, most people will be for term limits. I'm squishy on it because I can make the argument on both sides. But I do believe, my official position on this, I guess, is that I do believe that the government probably would function better with term limits. I don't know. You think the government would function better with term limits?
Term and age limits.
No, I don't.
I don't
Scientific
agree.
fact that cognitive motor function declines after 75.
Yeah, but they don't drive themselves, Sam, you silly man.
Yeah, but they're making decisions that impact hundreds of millions of Americans
that was
with
a joke.
declining cognitive function.
I got the whole drive thing.
Yeah.
Sammy was making a joke.
Is that what he was doing?
You have to recognize the official joke of the official host of the official show.
I can't with that sweater.
I like his sweater.
I'm taking him too seriously.
All right, so for people who are actually listening on the radio, the thousands of people listening on the radio, I've officially broke out my Christmassy kind of sweater. And if you're dying to see it, if you're driving to work and listening on the radio, go check me out on YouTube if you would. It's actually, you'll get tired of it because I've got another one, Joan and Sam, just like it. And this means that my wardrobe is set 2 days out of every week from now till February.
Well, for now, you look like the love interest in a Hallmark story.
So have you started watching Hallmark movies? I mean, they started the countdown to Christmas. It's begun.
Joan.
It's happening.
You made me sit through 2 hours and 15 minutes of Phantom of the Opera. I don't want to hear it from you on Hallmark movies. Are we going to get to what I actually wanted to talk about this segment?
Yeah, go.
Oh, Lord. All right, cringe on Pierre. So she says that she takes this very seriously when she says that people are asking her about Joe Biden and her lack of ability to admit that she saw signs of cognitive decline in Joe Biden.
So really, I want everybody to know that I take this question incredibly seriously. I do. I was his White House press secretary, which means I had a role that saw him practically every day and traveled with him.
And you saw nothing.
For more than 95%. We've always said, we're not going to say, oh, he didn't age. He aged. And he poked fun at it. We always owned up. And with age comes what happens when you get older.
Which is?
But when we talk about the mental acuity, and
you'll notice she didn't answer the question. The guy said, she's talking about what happens when you get older. And the guy was like, which is? And she doesn't answer the question. Whatever. Here's more from Cringe Jean-Pierre.
Again, I take this very, very seriously.
Yeah.
I never saw anyone who wasn't there. I saw someone who was always engaged. I saw someone who understood policy, pushed us on the policy, and also understood history. And there were times, I'll tell you the story, there were times where he would call me into the Oval Office, and I would be like, oh no, because I knew whatever he was going to ask me was going to be direct, was going to be about a story he read, about how we're pushing back, how we're pushing a message forward.
And you write about the people within the party pushing him out. Some would describe those people fighting for a replacement candidate is fighting. But you also describe this current state of the Democratic Party as too timid. And what can the Democratic Party do to get out of this timid and even some will say disappointing place?
So timid that you've gotten out of the Democratic Party.
Here's the thing. I actually think that the system is broken. The two-party system is broken, and we need it to be fixed, to be working in order for a democracy. Look, just this past Saturday, millions of people, 7 million people.
There you go. So Cringe Jean-Pierre. She never does answer the question, and she's getting a big-time pushback. Part of me wonders if, and I'm going to ask Matthew Hurtt this question coming up at 7:35, but I think one of the things that is going on is she is getting this pushback because she has denounced basically the Democrat Party. So I think that is also part of the dynamic. But, new look for Cringe Jean-Pierre. Same name from me and same old lies. By the way, Larry has this to say. Joan, I hope you were listening to Cringe on how she avoids these questions for when you get asked about how you didn't notice Dan's loss of mental acuity.
Yes, I did see that.
And then I love how Joan responds to that by saying,
I was hoping you didn't see.
I'm taking note and laughing all the way. So that's fine. Listen, it's all good.
Okay, so Larry has a response.
Mm-hmm.
Because you chimed in and said, I'm right here,
Yes.
And he said, oh, you won't remember.
See, this is why I love the super text line.
Yeah.
It is a lot of fun. Real quick, so RJ, does RJ know who's training today? No, Sam is not leaving us, by the way. RJ is training just to be a producer, fill in. Do you know how to give us the results of the Daily Dan poll on YouTube?
Yes.
Feel free, somebody to speak.
I'm seeing it right here. A lot of people are definitely saying we would function a lot better with term limits.
Okay, so RJ says that people are saying that we would function a lot better with term limits. So I think overall, okay, then I guess the next question is, and we can't do it on the super text on the YouTube poll, but I guess then the question is, Joan, what do you think is a good number for term limits? Do you think it should be, if you're in the House, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years? And if you're in the Senate, you think it ought to be 2 terms, 12 years? What do you think it ought to be?
I think the 12-year limit is a good limit.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I do think that's fair.
The designers of our country did not, this is not how they wanted it. If you remember in the beginning, they would attend Congress and go home. They weren't. It wasn't
they would go
year-round.
home. They would tend to the farms and
right. It wasn't a year-round thing. They didn't stay there the whole time. They would tend to the business of the country and tend to the business of their homes. And I think that's not a bad scenario, to go by.
Do you know what? Do you know? There's so many different stories of our founding fathers and historical figures. Do you know whose story I love the most? George Washington.
Yeah.
So because he didn't want to be president. He was like, can I go home? I've led the army. I've done all of these things. Can I just please go home now? And so he didn't want to be president. He finally was able to go home and do what he did. But he's got such a great. Maybe one day we'll do a whole show on the founding fathers. But for me, historical figures, George Washington, one of my favorites. The other thing that I liked about George Washington was he had a lot of losses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he had, and I don't have them off the top of my head. I read a book about him a long time ago, but here's a guy who definitely, he was the personification of learning from your failures and your successes, but definitely learning from your failures. And I believe, and I don't know, Joan, if you have an opinion on this, but I have definitely learned more from my many, many failures than my few successes.
Yes. And you know who's a great person? Have you ever heard of Tim Barton and Wall Builders?
No.
He writes books about this. He writes about the providential nature of George Washington coming to office and how his life went.
Really?
Yeah, it's really very cool.
Okay.
So just something to...
You got that? Can I borrow that book? Because I don't want to spend any money.
I will give you the book, yeah. Cheaper.
Want to welcome on into the program Matthew Hurtt. Matthew, always great to have you on. And term limits have come up today, so I'm going to ask you. I asked folks in the listening audience, who I do consider my friends, what do you think of term limits? Now, I already knew, because I've been on this radio station for a long time, that most folks would say absolutely to term limits. So, yes, resoundingly, people want term limits on this radio station. Matt Van Epps apparently has come out and now said that he does support term limits. And so then, Matthew, I asked the question, all right, so if you were, king like Donald Trump and you could implement term limits, then what would you do? And I've got a whole bunch of different responses. Some people are saying 12 years in the House, 12 years in the Senate. Other people saying, 4 years in the House, 4 years in the Senate. Other people saying, 4 plus 4, just like the president. So it's all over the place. And Matthew, I don't know if you and I have spoken about term limits before or not, but what's your official position on term limits?
Well, Dan, it's great to finally be on the program this morning. But before,
Matthew, just so folks know. Matthew got bumped earlier by Senator Marsha Blackburn. Somehow I screwed up the time again. I don't know what is wrong with me. I think I've got the Biden brain disease. But so I was supposed to, I think it was Sam that said, well, Dan, you have both Senator Marsha Blackburn and Matthew Hurtt on the phone at the same time. Make a choice.
Oh.
And
that's a fine choice, Dan. But I did come with George Washington interesting facts before I dig in on term limits. George Washington, little known fact, was an exceptional horseman. No one ever reportedly saw him thrown from a horse, and he was also an avid dancer, known to dance for hours at social events. Even Thomas Jefferson said that Washington was both the best horseman of his age and the most graceful figure that could be seen. So super cool, really? Interesting facts about George Washington this morning.
All right, now, hold on. I want to know, Joan, you might know the answer to this question.
Mm-hmm.
Did or did he not have wooden teeth? Joan, no, I think Joan knows the answer. Matthew, do you know the answer?
He did not have wooden teeth. He did have terrible dental problems, but his teeth were crafted from human teeth, animal bone, ivory, and even metal. So our first president had some ridiculous chompers. They just didn't have great teeth back then in general. But he was also the largest distiller and distributor of rye whiskey in the early American experiment. So,
I didn't know that.
You can see that out at Mount Vernon. Mm-hmm.
Out of Mount Vernon,
okay.
And that may have contributed to his poor teeth. But on term limits, Dan, you said it before the break. The voters decide term limits every 2 years or every 6 years. We look to George Washington actually as sort of the figure that said, I don't want to be president to begin with, but I'm also not going to serve as a king, and so he stepped back. Now, Franklin D. Roosevelt, notable socialist from the early 20th century, blew that precedent out of the water, which forced the American people through the Constitution to say absolutely not, no more than 2 terms for a president. And Joan Jones got it right before the break that in Virginia, a governor can serve non-sequential 4-year terms. So Glenn Youngkin is our governor in Virginia. He is prohibited from running again this cycle, but he could run again in 4 years.
Do you think he would win again? Matthew, do you think Glenn Youngkin? I like Glenn Youngkin. Do you think he would win again?
I think that a lot of his in-state activities had some legislative victories, but we've had a couple of election cycles where his political operation was responsible for getting some Republicans across the finish line, and they didn't. So I don't know. I don't know if that would be the case, but the voters get to decide, and you can't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are plenty of terrible members of Congress, and oftentimes polls say Americans are overwhelmingly disapproving of Congress, but their congressman is great. And so we get a bit of this paradox from the voters that say, if you're living in Middle Tennessee, if Mark Green is your outgoing congressman or Scott Desjardins is your congressman, you think the rest of Congress is awful, but you probably think your congressman is just fine.
Yeah.
And I do think that it takes a good candidate in a primary process or a general election process to say, hey, your member of Congress is not doing a great job. And is that difficult? Are there benefits rolled into being an incumbent? Yes, it makes it harder to defeat them, but I ultimately think that decision should rest with the voters and not with some arbitrary guideline, 2 years, 6 years, 12 years.
Let me follow up with that, though, because then my question would be, you see Mitch McConnell. We know what happened with Dianne Feinstein. Nancy Pelosi is in her 80s, I think 82 or 83. And I don't think, I'm just going to be honest, I don't think Nancy Pelosi is all there. And we certainly know what happened with Joe Biden. So is there somewhere in between, you're a lot smarter at politics than I am. So is there somewhere in there where we can all agree that, I don't know, Mitch McConnell is too dang old to be falling around the hallways of the Senate?
Well, on the Senate side, they actually reward seniority. So the House is to a certain extent very similar, but on the Senate side, the decisions are held by the most senior members of the Senate. That's why you see in leadership on both the Republican and the Democrat side, generally the leaders tend to be the longest-serving individuals. Committee assignments are oftentimes apportioned to the longest-serving members of those committees. And so that is how the system exists. If you were constantly sending a new member of Congress, let's say, in Murfreesboro and Rutherford County, if they sent a new member of Congress every 2 years, that member of Congress would, quote, never be able to get anything done for his or her district. And so that's the balance, is that those institutions, the House and the Senate, both exist on a seniority basis where the senior members are awarded top positions on committees, chairmanships, leadership positions. And so that's the balance that we have to sort of look at when we think about this.
All right, Matthew, real quick. There is, and we're going to talk shutdown real quick. So there's some polling out there that shows that the Democrats are going to be held accountable for the shutdown, as I believe that they should. There's other reports, including this story out of the Hill that I was talking about earlier, where the Democrats are freaking out because they're afraid that if they sign off on what they are saying, and I guess is considered a Republican CR, then they are going to be primaried. I mean, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, this is it's fascinating to watch. I've said since the beginning of the shutdown that Republicans will likely be blamed, even though it is primarily a process. You can lay the blame of the process at the feet of the Democrats. Polling shows that Americans are about split. I think it's about a 10-point margin between blaming Republicans and blaming Democrats, with Republicans taking most of the blame. This is a fight over Obamacare. And the Democrats want to run out the clock through about mid-November on this. It's absolutely outrageous. That as Senator Blackburn said in the last hour, she's meeting with President Trump at the White House. The Senate Republicans are trying to do something about this. House Republicans want to reopen the government. This is the first time in my memory that the government has been shut down where it actually hasn't been the Republicans' fault, or not necessarily fault in a negative context, but the blame of the Republicans on the process side. And this is gamesmanship by the Democrats. They know that it will work out in their favor in the court of public opinion for most voters. And so they are playing this political game. It's really unfortunate to see.
Boy, it sure is, and we'll have to see where it all lands. We've got J.D. Vance going to Israel. President Trump saying that he was basically going to exterminate Hamas or work on that if ultimately they don't behave. We know that they're not behaving now, killing 2 IDF soldiers. What do you think is going to happen in the Middle East?
Yeah, I was really disappointed earlier this week to see, I thought we had this agreement between Israel and Hamas. Last week, I believe you and I talked about it, and then Hamas goes and does this thing to just, again, it's a serious matter. A lot of folks were brought to the table. There's this agreement. This is a marquee success of the Trump administration. But beyond that, it is right for the people of the Middle East to stop this fighting. Hostages were released,
yep.
and it seems like Hamas is just not being taken seriously. And I think that is because if you look at the agreement that President Trump has outlined and that everyone seems to be agreeing to, it takes Hamas out of leadership roles in the Palestinian regions, in Gaza and other places. And when a political entity, now Hamas is the political entity of the Palestinian people in Gaza, a political entity is going to lose its power. They are going to do whatever they can to keep power, and so this again games they're playing is fooling around with an agreement that ultimately cuts them out of being able to govern in the future.
Is it fair to say that the only thing Hamas is good at is killing people?
I think so, and killing people and not taking care of the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Whenever there were resources funneled into Gaza, funneled into other areas, the Hamas governing infrastructure, rather than providing that to the people of those areas, they used it to build tunnels, they used it to build weapons, they used it to build ways to subvert authority and security in the area. If you want to, people say free Palestine. If you want to free Palestine, you have to free Palestine from Hamas.
Yes.
That is the problem. They are not a serious governing entity, and they should not have a seat at the table in a future where the Palestinian people seek to peacefully coexist with the people of Israel.
I'm coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. I'm going to play some audio and video of Harry Enton talking about Donald Trump's popularity, where it is right now, as opposed to his first term, and also the Democrats and where they are from Donald Trump's first term to where they are now. And I'll spare everyone the suspense. Democrats are not doing well, especially when you look at, comparatively speaking, to Trump's first term. Blue wave in the midterms. This is from the USA Today. I'm just going to give you the headline. Don't count on a blue wave in the midterms. Most Americans are saying Democrats are weak, by the way, including a lot of Democrats. So I don't know. I feel like we talk about this all the time. But do you believe that the American people believe that Democrats are weak?
Well, the cash on hand for the Republican National Committee after the last report is $86 million. Cash on hand for the Democrats is $12 million. The Gallup third quarter party ID, there was a bit of a shift away from Republicans to independents. I think it's 48% Democrat, 41% Republican. So a small shift. But Donald Trump's net approval on immigration is of his positive 9. He's got an approve disapprove of 46-51, which is up 1 over the last time they took that poll. So he is doing pretty well. And I think that as we look to the midterms, people are going to say, how's my pocketbook doing? How's the economy doing? Do I feel safe in my community? And on those issues, many Americans believe that Donald Trump and Republican policies are what advance their general well-being at the kitchen table.
Let me talk about kitchen table issues real quick, and I'm running out of time, but kitchen table issues. So let's say we come up to the midterm elections. Let's say that eventually the peace deal in the Middle East actually holds. Let's say that, a lot of things that President Trump has been trying to do ultimately ends up with a success. The streets are safer. The border is secure. All of these other things. The American people, I think, pretty well. You read polling and all that. So do you think that even if inflation is still higher than we want it to be, Do you think the American people will take a look at everything that President Trump has been able to do and have a little bit of forgiveness if the price of things is still a little high?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would also say we got to factor in the redistricting efforts across a number of states.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If those efforts make it across the finish line, the majority in the House is 218 votes, 218 seats. And if those redistricting efforts make it across the finish line, Republicans are looking at starting with about 225 to 227 seats. So an automatic majority, it would take a massive blue wave, which we have not seen in a long time, to disrupt that breakdown.
All right, real quick, governor's race. We've got Winsome Sears versus Abigail Spanberger. We all know about the whole Jay Jones thing. You and I have been talking about this for a long time. Is there any update on what is going on between these two?
The election is 2 weeks from today. The latest poll, I believe it was Coefficient, has Spanberger at 49, Earl Sears at 44, but Jason Miyares is up 4 points over Jay Jones, 46 to 42. And in the lieutenant governor's race, the Democrat has about a 5-point lead. So we're looking at about the same spread for governor and lieutenant governor, but 4 points up, a 9-point swing from the governor and lieutenant governor race to the attorney general race. I think this is now probably Jason Miyares' race to lose, and we'll see if he can carry or narrow the margin for the governor and lieutenant governor's race.
So give me some perspective real quick. So what's the margin of error on the governor's race? I mean, you said that you've got Spanberger up by 5. What's the margin of error?
Margin of error is plus or minus 3.19%. So within the margin of error, the question that we have to ask in Virginia is how many people have already voted since before the Jay Jones scandal broke. And I'm looking just anecdotally in Arlington. I have about a universe of 25,000 Republican voters that I can get to turn out, and about a third of them have turned out as of yesterday.
All right, Matthew, how can people find you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter or X at Matthew Hurtt, MatthewHurtt.